It's a delight to be here and have a chance to talk to you briefly about my research on creativity. So first, let me motivate the issue. Every year, IBM does a global CEO study where they survey 1,500 CEOs, 60 different countries, 33 different industries, and they ask them several different questions. And in this particular year, they ask them, what is the most important leadership skill your firm is going to need in the coming 5 years? And the number one answer, it trumped even integrity, which is probably another talk for another day, was creativity. And what's interesting, I think, and somewhat ironic, is at the very time that we're recognizing the importance of creativity in our organizations, we're learning that at least in the US and North America, the supply of creative talent may actually be shrinking. So since the 60s, we have measured school-age kids' IQ scores. And throughout the ages, throughout these decades, we've seen a slow but steady, consistent increase over time. At the same time, we've also measured their creativity scores using the Torrance test of creativity, which I'll talk about a little bit more in detail later. But essentially what they found is that from the 60s, the Torrance creativity scores were tracking right there along with the IQ scores until the 90s. Until the mid-90s, IQ kept going, Torrance leveled off, and now we're starting to see a bit of a decline. And the question is why? What happened in the mid-90s that may have caused us to become less creative? Video games, and I'm seeing the phones flash at me. I'm seeing lots of phones flash at me, right. So you could blame it on educational policy. That may be a contributing factor. I don't have the necessary complete and total answer here, but I have a good hypothesis like you do that technology played a bit of a role in this. So think about how it affects your lives. When you start to think about it now, we can always find whatever we want online. We always know, there we go. We always know how much it costs. If we don't trust our own judgment, we can trust the judgment of the crowd. We always know that we're not going to get taken because we can always compare prices, and it keeps going. We're never lost if we have a signal. We know when it's going to rain and where it's going to rain, and becoming more important to me these days, if I can't remember a name or a word, what do? Google. So the upshot of all of this essentially is that we are less uncertain more frequently. Does that make sense? Our tolerance for ambiguity, my hypothesis is going down. So for those of you who has seen this TED Talk by Sir Ken Robinson, How Schools Kill Creativity. For those of you who have not seen it, it's the most downloaded TED Talk, and I highly encourage you to go watch it. But my favorite quote out of that TED Talk is, if you're not prepared to be wrong, you will never come up with anything original. And I think we, especially as we move into adulthood, we are less tolerant of being wrong. It's one of our biggest fears. And so to move on to the research, I think a really good metaphor for this is found in the toy aisle. So when I was a kid, there we go. When I was a kid, if someone invited you over to their house to play with Legos, this is what they were talking about, right? Get on the floor, you dump this thing out, and you go to town. What do you see now in the toy aisle? Kids. What's the difference between these two? Exactly. So you know where you're going, you know what it's going to look like, you're told exactly how to get there, and you know when you're done. None of that is true in this particular situation. You don't know where you're going, you don't know when you're done, and you don't know how to get there. So not coincidentally, I have a young son who loves Legos, and since I've been studying creativity for 15 years, it occurred to me that I might be killing his by feeding his Lego habit. So I decided to take this into the lab and try an experiment to understand if, in fact, doing one or the other of these tasks had an impact on his subsequent creativity. So we did this experiment here at Madison on college-age students, and we had half of them play with Legos for the equivalent amount of time that the other half put together a kit. And what we did after that was we gave them, we fully crossed it in a 2x2 design. We gave half of those people, something you may remember from your days of applying to college, the test of analogical thinking, which does require a little bit of creative thought to make those relations, but there is a known solution, right? So we weren't totally stacking the deck here. The other group, we had do the unfinished figures test from the Torrance test of creativity. And with this, those people who received this task were tasked with finishing this picture and giving it a title. And as you can see, these both are going to score quite highly. This one's literally outside of the box. Here's what I got. Sphere. On one end of the low scorers, you've got the sphere. No abstract title. We saw a whole lot of spheres. On the other side, though, this was our highest scorer, restrictions. I don't really know what it means. I don't know exactly what it represents, but it's novel, it's unique, and it's abstract. So we had these judged in our experiment, and I won't bore you with the methodology for the numbers, but basically the results suggested that for those who played with the Legos, they had a positive score. For those who played with the kit, or put together the kit, negative score. Now the question is, was playing driving up the score, or was the kit driving it down? And the sad news for me was that the kit was driving it down, right? There were no effects on the analogy scores. Okay, so some initial evidence that the kits are reducing creativity. We flipped it and had them do something different on the next slide in the next experiment. And what we did was have them choose. So if you did a kit, for example, did you want to do another kit as your next task? And with this experiment, the answer was yes. If you had completed a well-defined task, you wanted to do another one. It's sort of like juicing the system, and it's a self-reinforcing cycle. So I'll cut to the chase here and not leave you on a negative note. So can we foster creativity? Yes, and we've done some interesting, I think, experiments to show that we can. So the good news is that creativity is 94% process and system, it's 6% employees, and most firms get it exactly backwards. So with that, thank you.
I'll take some questions. We have time for some questions for Dr. Moreau. Questions? Get extra scoop ice cream.
Just a quick one. Have you published the data on the Lego study?
Yes. It's in the Journal of Marketing Research, 2016, so thanks.
Any other ones? Yeah.
What about Pinterest?
What about Pinterest?
Is there a connection with, now that Pinterest is a thing, I'm not a pinner or anything, but that people are showing their creativity and doing fun things with useless stuff or whatever?
I won't give you a definitive answer. I think some people definitely are. It's giving them a platform to explore. I think other people, though, are using it instead of thinking up the idea themselves, they're just copying somebody else's that looks really cool. So on any given day, you could be doing one or the other.